You got the victory, but check the stats, brother. Like, there is a box score.
It finally happened. It finally happened. We saw every NFL team on a football field playing against another NFL team. After 6 months of talking about what it might look like, we now know the answers. Welcome to the SumerSports Show. Post week 1, What Have We Learned edition. Lindsay Rhodes with Sam Bruchhaus. We're going to get to our major takeaways in just a bit. But like Sam, sitting on a couch, watching game after game after game, it was a glorious few days for us.
It was incredible, and it was crazy how quick the insights came, Lindsay. Like,
Yeah.
it felt like we had a lot of questions. Obviously, as it went later in the day, we had less questions about teams like the Baltimore Ravens and the Bills, who gave us an absolute show.
I think
But
they're
I felt
both
like
gonna be good.
first quarter, I already had a page full of notes of things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we don't have time to get to all the things that we want to talk about. We're just gonna have to pick a few things. Shawn Syed is going to join us momentarily. He of the film breakdown scheme expertise. He's gonna tell us his primary takeaways, what he learned in week 1. And then, as I mentioned, we'll get to our main takeaways in that department in just a little bit. But first, we have some tracking data to get to. We have a way here. I'm going to let you describe it. Our Sumer scores. How would you describe it from a player standpoint, what it actually does and what we're about to discuss?
Right. Our Sumer scores are a play-by-play evaluation of each player on each play. And so the idea is we're trying to divide credit amongst the players instead of just saying, the team did good on this. We're trying to actually figure out who did something good. And so the way we do that is by comparing the relationships between each player using tracking data and the ball on that play with literally every historical version of it in the NGS era, which stretches back to like 2016. And using that, we're able to get an idea of what a good play really looks like for a left tackle, a left guard. And moreover, it is objective and it considers all the crazy variances that can happen and then tries to wrap it into, a good product to indicate whether or not that player did something well on that play. And then you roll that up and it gives us a sense of how good their game was.
Yeah, what you said there about it being player agnostic, I think is one of the coolest parts, because if you're subjectively grading every play, you can't help but know, oh, well, that's Jamar Chase, right? Like, that as you're watching him run every route. Like, this model does not know that. It doesn't take that into account. And so I think that this is an awesome way to take a look at, what each player did. And certainly there were some standouts. This is not a new thing that we've discussed. We've talked about SumerScore a lot on this show, but I thought since we now have specific game data that we're going to get into, it was worth sort of resetting the table. Let's talk about some of the standouts, the names who popped, either positively or negatively, whichever direction you want to go in. Where do you want to start?
I want to start on the offensive line because I think that is what we don't talk about the most, but what affects the game the most. And we talked about with Bob Wiley earlier on in the summer, Lindsay, you talked with him about how hard it is to evaluate. So I always like to get a sense of how good these guys played. And I know we're going to discuss a little bit more with Shawn, but Joe Alt was the best pass blocking left tackle in the league this week.
After playing last season at right tackle and
Correct.
filling in for Rashawn Slater this week at left. Big question mark. I don't know that my question mark was so much how he would perform. It was more like how they would fill that gap on the right side, but highly notable that he just went from right to left and then was the highest score.
100%. And when you think about that Chargers offense last year, it was up and down, man. Justin Herbert was always pretty good. And I think the reason all last year I talked about was because I thought their two tackles were really good. When you go into Brazil, we saw all kinds of stuff happen last year with the Eagles-Packers game. Everyone kind of expected travel to be something and the crowd to maybe cause something with the game. And moreover, you're going against Steve Spagnuolo with a whole offseason to get ready for you. And for Joe Alt to make such a monumentous shift, if you talk to any O-lineman, they'll break that down for you, to the left side against a defensive coordinator who probably would try to attack something like that. him standing tall, protecting Justin Herbert, and what really was an MVP level performance from Justin Herbert really shows how strong that connection is between those two. I think as a little celebration, he took him out with his celebrity girlfriend, Madison Beer, afterward. So,
I thought he
you
was
play
maintaining
good.
that they were just friends. Has he admitted now that they actually have we confirmed that, or are we just sort of like assuming
They may be just friends, but
they
when
hang
you're
out a
going
lot?
to the club and you're rewarding your left tackle, you want to bring your girlfriend after an excellent game in Brazil.
All right. I mean, I don't know. I was willing to take him at face value that they were just in a chess club together. Worth noting for LA, Mekhi Becton was literally ranked right behind Joe Alt in pass block SumerScore. And important for that as well, Jamari Sawyer actually came in ahead of Alt with a lower snap filter. And certainly he's a guard, not a tackle. But 3 Chargers offensive linemen in the top 5 pass blocking scores to just kind of double back on the points that you're making about Herbert. That right tackle, Trey Pipkins, though, much further down the list in pass blocking, much higher in run blocking. However, he was the highest Charger in that department, ranked 30th out of 171 offensive linemen in that category. But they need that right side to stay strong with Slater out. Okay, so you know who came in right after those 3 Chargers in pass blocking? The person that I want to talk about here. It's funny that we both went with offensive linemen right out of the gate. Who grabbed my attention was Charles Cross for the Seattle Seahawks, who had a great game going up against Nick Bosa after a whole bunch of concern about offseason hand injury, dislocated finger, wondered if we'd get him back in time to play this game. He was 6th in pass block SumerScore. He was 8th in run block SumerScore. We've never had him ranked higher than the 64th percentile in pass blocking for a season. So if this is the sign or a sign of a next step for him, that would be great news for a Seahawks team that is constantly talking about needing to get better on the offensive line and who seem to have hit on their draft pick with Gray Zabel. And B, would, I think, lead to us discussing a potential extension for him now that Abe Lucas has already been paid. He's Charles Cross currently under contract for 1 year after this one. So that's an interesting one that I'll be monitoring moving forward. Following up on that, though, a Seahawk that kind of worried me, Cooper Kupp. He did not score well on Sunday. We had him 84th out of 127, lower than their rookie Torrey Horton. The reason I am worried about it, and I know you know this answer, rather than writing it off as one game, as I would for like A.J. Brown and Brian Thomas Jr., who also had terrible games in terms of our receiving SumerScore. The reason that I think it's meaningful for Cooper Kupp, or at least like a red flag for me, is because of the way that it continues a pattern of decline that's been established for him in the last couple of years, a year and a half. We talked about this in the offseason. His receiving SumerScores have fallen off a cliff last year after slightly coming down the year before. This could be a blip, I suppose, or it could be a sign that he's just not going to be that guy anymore.
It's really interesting talking about both Cross and Kupp and the relationship with Darnold, because the offense looks radically different than what the offense looked like last year. Last year, there was a lot of pass rate over expected for the Seahawks. There was a lot of kind of shotgun play action going on. And now it's moving into a world where with Clint Kubiak, you're going to get a lot of under center play and you're not going to get a ton of play action. So it's very interesting to note, number one, that Charles Cross was able to stand tall against a pretty good and re-coordinated with Robert Salah defensive line for the 49ers without the help of play action. As it pertains to Darnold and Kupp, those are 2 players who played with KOC and Sean McVay, 2 of the foremost utilizers of play action. And if Kupp is not going to be the same level of athletic guy that he has been in past years, the question remains is he just going to be able to get open without play action, without motion, without all this other stuff? I think that remains an outstanding question, and it remains a much bigger question for Sam Darnold, given that a lot of the same stuff is going to be in place as was with KOC and the Minnesota Vikings, except play action. And I think that major item is something to continue watching, in particular with those 3 players that you named, Lindsay, because that is such a big deal in this league, and particularly in the in the NFC West, where you're having to deal with Jared Verse, you're having to deal with Nick Bosa, and you're having to deal with a retooled Arizona Cardinals defensive line and a pretty respected defensive play caller in John Gannon.
Cooper Kupp's former teammate Puka Nacua, notably crushed. Like, I mean, let me know if you get tired of us telling you how good Puka Nacua is, but like, I would be remiss if I did not mention that he was number 1 in our receiving SumerScore in week 1. Bro had 11 targets and a 90% catch rate and was checked for a concussion twice. So like, this wasn't even like the perfect storm for this game, but yep, still number 1 SumerScore. Like, we're just going to go ahead and slot him in there, I think, consistently, it seems.
Keep in mind that Puka has been, I wouldn't call it relatively injured, but he has missed games in his career. But Puka Nacua is the only player in the sample that we have for SumerScore who, on a play-by-play basis, has always been an offensive player of the year level wide receiver. The reason why he has not been in those discussions is because of injury. So if we can get 17 games of Puka Nacua, Lindsay, we're
Oh my God,
hopefully going to see something that is on the level of the Cooper Kupp year, on the Jamar Chase year last year. Hopefully we get to see that, especially given that Sean McVay is dialing it up for him.
I mean, and by the way, not fingers crossed for Rams purposes or anything like that, but like, I think we all deserve to see a good 17 game sample size out of Puka Nacua.
100%. And we get to test that we said earlier on in the year in that we think he's just like certifiably a top 3 wide receiver in this league alongside Justin Jefferson and alongside Jamar Chase. That was not the consensus, but you look at literally any advanced statistic and he is an absolute beast at those statistics.
He is. Who else?
I want to look at the defensive side of the ball, and I wanted to look at teams who everyone thought was just going to be miserable, and they popped up in SumerScores. And unfortunately for me, as a Louisiana native, the New Orleans Saints, not a lot was expected. There was expected to be major regression from their older former All-Pros, and no one really believed in their young players. Demario Davis is 36 years old. I can understand why there will be regression. We talked about the offensive linemen, Lindsay, about how they're hard to evaluate, and that's why I like to use these scores to evaluate linebackers, at least descriptively as well, because they give us a sense of who's really playing well. Demario Davis was very good in them last year. Once again, he is extremely good at them last year. I got to shout out Fred Warner, too, who was also very good against the Seahawks. But it was quietly an above-average game from the Saints defense, who have moved pretty cataclysmically from a Dennis Allen defense to a Brandon Staley defense that looks radically, radically different. No drop-off at all from Demario Davis. He led virtually in every single pass rush, coverage, run defense. In all of those, he was an elite player in SumerScore. And if the Saints want to have any progression from their team, I think he's going to have to continue to play at that level. And if you look back at history, that's just who he is at this point. So don't expect any regression from Demario Davis as long as he is healthy and on the field. And I think that means a lot for the Saints defense.
Sidebar, are we going to see a regression in targets to Juwan Johnson, or is he going to be this involved in that offense all year long? What is going on?
It was really, I mean, I obviously wish he would have made the catch in the end zone to win the game, but I think that was an interesting thing too. I mean, they go ahead and end up keeping him on the team despite everything going around, and people were wondering if he would ever be the Jimmy Graham level tight end that provided so much to Drew Brees back in the day with Sean Payton. Obviously, we switch from that kind of Sean Payton tree. We go to Clint Kubiak. We're still not really seeing it. All of a sudden, a breakout game from Jawan Jennings in this past week with Kellen Moore. I'm really interested to see how that offense continues to look.
As am I. I'm going to stick with the tight ends for a second and just highlight one that we knew was good, but turned out to be very good in week 1, maybe even a little bit more so out of the gate than I expected, and that's Tyler Warren. I stayed away from drafting him in fantasy, partially, I would say maybe entirely because I was scared of the offense and just had no idea what to expect. And it was obviously just one game, and it was the Dolphins, and they looked not great, Bob, but Tyler Warren was as advertised. Receiving SumerScore at tight end, he came in at number 2. But of the 14 tight ends who had 20 or more run blocking snaps, he was the highest scoring guy out of all of them. 9 targets, 7 catches. I mean, like, what more do you want from a guy who is a rookie in this offense? Like, he did it all.
The crazy thing too is there's this little bang bang play that ends up in the middle of the end zone where Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of interferes with him. It would have been a walk-in touchdown. Minkah Fitzpatrick with the veteran play to just kind of act like he trips, chop his legs out from underneath. So this game could have been better for Tyler Warren. I think there was a lot of discussion going into the NFL draft about how, you don't necessarily know which tight end is good. You don't know if Colston Loveland is better. You don't know if Tyler Warren is better. You go with the consensus. You try to figure it out. Maybe you wait until a guy like Mason Taylor, who played 100% of snaps, and just go with him to try to get more surplus value. When it came down to it, Tyler Warren balled out in week 1, and it really kind of validated what the preseason fantasy draft strategy was that if you can't get McBride and you can't get Brock Bowers and you can't get Kittle, who now 2 of those guys seem to be a little banged up, just wait it out until you can get one of these rookie tight ends, especially given we have 100% snap share basically for Mason Taylor. And now you have an excellent game from Tyler Warren. It really proves itself out. I'm really interested to see if the Colts offense can keep this up. Kind of a maniacal game between the Miami Dolphins and the Colts, but the level of attention that they showed him is what I really like to see.
That's the thing. And that was also one of the questions was like at the point when I was drafting a lot of these fantasy drafts, I was like, I don't even know if it's Anthony Richardson or if it's Daniel Jones. I don't know what the pass catchers look like with Daniel Jones. Who's the priority? Like, it just was so unknown. Now we know. And he's clearly a priority in the offense, and love it. Lots more on tight ends, by the way, still to come. Shawn Syed is here, so I want to get to him in just a second. First, though, I just want to highlight really quickly that it was a good week for some of the rookie running backs as well. Rough week for some of the best running backs in terms of our scoring. Bajan, retraining myself, near the bottom of the list, very high in receiving, but run was not as good as normal. Gibbs was low. Those are just weird flukes of weeks, right? But RJ Harvey and Bill Krosky-Merritt were 1 and 2 in run SumerScore for running backs, certainly notable. And then Dylan Sampson was the highest pass route SumerScore for running backs. He was very low for rushing, though. But I thought it was interesting that the leaders in both of those categories and 1-2 in the run category were both rookies.
Yeah, it's great to see, because the whole thing about this rookie class was there's a ton of dudes at running back. And we're talking about guys who were picked in the 3rd round, the 7th round, undrafted guys. It's just a lot of great running backs. And I like to see the ball run well, Lindsay. I don't know about you. And so it's exciting to see those guys get reps, number 1, and number 2, take advantage of them.
All right, more of our takeaways in just a bit. I mentioned that Shawn Syed is here. He's ready to join us. Let's bring him in, and we can hear about, should we start with the team that I know he pays extra special close attention to, and that is the Eagles, who this feels like it was like years ago at this point now, kicking off the season on Thursday, but there were a lot of questions afterward about what happened with A.J. Brown, and I know you went through that tape with a fine-tooth comb. What'd you find?
Lindsay, it was really interesting because when we think about A.J. Brown, he is a player that you expect to be fed in every single game with double-digit targets over and over. And the first thing I wanted to do after the game was absolutely just see, what was the plan for Brown overall? Was it something the Cowboys defense was doing? Was it something Jalen Hurts was looking at? And early on, I really actually felt like the Cowboys' zone coverage was pretty good. I thought they did a good job kind of crowding Brown's space. But the way that Brown was being used, he was sort of breaking inside back towards that middle of the field area pretty often, where you're going to have more resources from the defense to be able to sort of undercut that route. And then by the end of the game, kind of on those last 2 drives, now we bump him inside a little bit. Now we're running him on those out-breaking routes towards the sideline where you're getting that sort of one-on-one. This is an isolation that we all know and love because A.J. Brown constantly wins on those. So it's going to be interesting just to see how things kind of go forward with, is his usage going to change? Is it something where they expected something from the defense and got something a little bit different? I'm going to be excited to kind of see how it goes in week 2, because I don't expect the rest of the season to have 1 A.J. Brown target per game.
No, certainly. I was wondering at a certain point in the game, like, is he hurt? Is he out there as a decoy? Somebody mentioned that he was running a lot of short routes, that he wasn't going long on a lot of them. Did you find anything that made it seem like that was possible, or do you think that that's probably not what was happening?
I mean, there's always a chance. It's always hard, I think, to speculate on injuries. He had, I believe, an injury during training camp. Is it that, hey, that lingered? I'm not sure. I think there were some people that said, oh, he's not cutting kind of out of his routes at that same level. I think we'll, internally can look at sort of our internal tracking metrics for Sumer to see, okay, how fast is this player moving kind of versus the past. I don't think he was being used as a decoy, though, because there were a bunch of examples. One example where he's isolated on one side, you have 4 eligible receivers to the other side. Like, they were clearly trying to get him the ball. Like, that is an important thing for me, where it's not like they forgot that they had AJ Brown. I think it will be seen, is there any reporting on any injury? I don't believe he's on any injury reports. I think we can only sort of, take that information and then take kind of the movement, the tracking information from him and go forward there.
He did, by the way, I mentioned the Sumer scores and where Cooper Kupp was. I noticed AJ Brown was right ahead of him in the wide receiver ranks, which is not at all where you would expect either of them to be, but feels like an off game to me. And I know that we look at what we see from him specifically, as opposed to whether he was targeted, whether or not it was like, is he creating separation? Is he making the most of his opportunities? And it looked like something was off for him and not just the offense, at least our AI metrics seemed to think so. There were other games that you obviously took a look at. The Chargers on Friday. What the heck happened? What was different? I hated the fact that people were talking about, well, maybe not people, but the post-game show kept saying that it was like a career-defining game for Justin Herbert. And I was like, have we watched Justin Herbert play? This did feel like taking a step forward, maybe, in terms of putting it all together. But that also feels gross to say because it's week 1 and it's 1 week. But that said, something did seem to click. What did you notice?
I mean, one of my favorite parts was in the post-game interview. They're like, hey, Justin, how to feel? And he's like, oh, just another game. It's like, all right, Justin.
Yeah.
I
He's
love
so
that
boring, and I love it.
I do think the most exciting part for me, obviously, I mean, like when Justin Herbert throws a football, it's hard to not get excited about that. But I thought that the Chargers offense did a really, really good job of creating conflict for the Chiefs secondary. That, I think we're used to Spags, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, having so many parts that are so used to what he wants to do. But I mean, Greg Roman did a really good job of, you're getting crossers in different directions. You're having, you're creating a bunch of friction where now Quentin Johnson is just running wide open. I did like a quick breakdown of that. And I was like, oh, this is a play that Harbaugh used at Michigan. You're able to take that. You're able to bump it up to the next level. Everyone in the NFL is using it. Go ahead and use it yourself as well. So I was impressed by like the overall just pass rate. I think there was a late game situation where it's like they're in a super heavy set and they go into play action right away. It's like, all right, like you're really trying to go ahead and win this game on offense. You're not saying, hey, we need to super duper like establish the run and kind of pound our heads against a wall in that direction. So that was, I think, kind of exciting to me from the Chargers offense.
They also, their pass catchers. It was wild to me that that Justin Herbert had such a good game when I had so many questions going into the game about who was going to be catching the ball outside of Lad McConkey. Like Keenan Allen looked like Keenan Allen from a few years ago. I mean, I don't know if physically he actually did, but in terms of usage and production, I thought that we had a lot of questions kind of answered there in a positive way. Did you feel that as well?
I mean, I just love watching Lad McConkey run routes. It's like, it's so exciting, Lindsay. I wouldn't expect to be bringing up Keenan Allen right now, but I think it's a positive situation, I guess. Like, that's something that I probably personally underrated just a little bit, just his comfort overall, your kind of placement in the offense with him. I was impressed. Like, I'm glad you mentioned usage overall, because early on in the game, you get Quentin Johnson like running across the formation, starting on the line of scrimmage, which you generally don't see that kind of route run in that way. You're usually kind of a little bit closer to the backfield. It's just like, it's not a tell for the defense. So to use that, you get him on the move, you get him able to break some tackles, get down the field. I was just impressed. I think going into the season, all of us had questions like, all right, well, what does the Chargers offense look like now? And they obviously still have things to figure out overall. I was really happy with how Joe Alt looked at left tackle, but the usage aspects of it, I was, pretty encouraged. And I mean, I know Sam has a lot of thoughts on the Chargers offense overall.
Yeah. So you're painting a picture, Shawn, of a better landscape for Justin Herbert. And I think he was able to take advantage of that landscape. And also it seemed as if he had a little bit more control. And as we all know, for 2 years, I have been calling for Justin Herbert to, get a little involved in the run game. 7 carries on this game. Do you think that's something that we're going to see him a little bit more get a little bit more active in the scramble game, break the pocket, try to make some plays, after 2 or 3 seconds to someone like Ladd McConkey, who, as you mentioned, is an excellent route runner? Or do you think as the season goes on, he's going to play a little bit more safe?
I wish everyone could see my text message thread where whenever a quarterback scrambles, I know the first notification is going to come from Sam Bruchhaus. I just know it's going to happen. Even on the ones that Herbert got called back for. I think when you look at Herbert generally, maybe early on in his career, you can say, he's a little bit too robotic where he's just going 1, 2, 3, check down. Like, can you kind of have some creativity within that? We all saw it on the game-winning play, right? Like, that pocket gets broken. This guy is gone, and he is hard to stop on the ground. Now, am I, Sam, personally designing 15 carries for Justin Herbert? I don't think anyone is going to do that just because of how valuable he is as a passer. But if you're able to create just a little bit more with those scrambles, I kind of think that was a theme overall from week 1 where we just talked about the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles offense was able to score points because Jalen Hurts was scrambling, right? And so when you have a quarterback that can create a positive when you're just not, everything's not there, and that doesn't say, the Chargers offense, I think, on schedule was actually really good, but you add that extra level in it, it's just so hard to stop. It bails you out of so many situations. That third down or that game-ending play, there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that just cannot solve that situation. And for him to be able to do it, game 1, big stage, you're coming out of there feeling really, really good.
Are we feeling good that maybe Quentin Johnston figured out how to catch the ball?
I think that's up for Quentin Johnston to be able to decide. You can look at, all right, are you catching the ball with your body or catching the ball with your hands? Me personally, hey, you caught the ball. That's all that's good. I'm not your receivers coach. I don't have to look at it all. I hope so, because I think when you generally look at the data, and Sam, you can tell me I'm wrong, drops in one game is not always super predictive of drops in the next game. Obviously, the story around Johnson is big. For CeeDee Lamb, hey, this guy's a high target player. You're going to have drops. We all remember thinking about, hey, Jamar Chase can't catch a football in the preseason. Oh, that's the best receiver in the league right now. So, Lindsay, I certainly hope so.
This is a few years worth of sample size, but Dontavian Wicks also weirdly was one of our highest scoring wide receivers.
Look, there are going to be drop passes, but when you see the Chargers using Johnson in ways that hey, that underneath route, that can be just a positive situation, you get things going. Right. I think you can start to feel a little bit better, hopefully, about that.
And we've seen a lot of bad drops from Quentin Johnston. But the good thing about our SumerScores is it does consider the context of who's around you, what's going on. And as a result, it kind of builds in some of that variance to the SumerScore. So if it is a bang play and all of a sudden you drop the ball, it's not going to knock you as hard as kind of a cut and dry drops are bad strategy, which I really like, because it bakes in, in history, how many of those balls have been caught. Quentin Johnston was a very unique story last year in the data, because he was not very good in the first half, and he started to build up a case for being a certified wide receiver 2 or excellent wide receiver 3 in this offense as the year went on. We started to see his route running metrics go up. We started to see him receive a lot more targets from Justin Herbert, a lot more target share, but production did not follow basically until the last game of the year. I think it's excellent to see production really follow and all of those things come through to week 1 this year, because it shows kind of the building and the idea of what they want this Chargers offense to be, which I think is really interesting.
What about the offensive coordinator change in Tampa Bay? This was the biggest question, I think, about that team, whether they would metabolize. I mean, gosh, same with Detroit. And there's a lot to discuss with regards to coordinators that we lost that we thought actually had a lot of effect on their offensive success specifically. And then Tampa Bay didn't look quite as good as they did last year, but they did some things well. So what did you notice there?
Yeah, Lindsay, it's an interesting situation in Tampa Bay where, if you're an offensive coordinator in the league, you want to be the Eagles offensive coordinator, you want to be the Bucks offensive coordinator, because you're about to get a head coaching job the next season. I think Bowles has just done a good job the last 2 picking those people. Obviously, you lose Liam Cohen, who had I think, a lot of unique ways to attack defenses. You bring in Josh Grizzard, who I don't believe he called plays before at all in the NFL. You're missing Tristan Wirfs. You're moving people along the offensive line. in that game, I mean, Grizzard's not going to look at this back and say, hey, this is the best game I'm ever going to call in my career. There were situations where Baker Mayfield probably should have had like multiple interceptions in this game. Emeka Egbuka in his first game had an awesome touchdown a little bit earlier. And in that game winner, Lindsay, when I was watching it back, it's like, wait, they ran that play twice before. Like, are you as an offense able to gain information from what a defense is telling you and trust that? Where I'm sure Egbuka went probably back in the huddle and was like, this play is going to be a touchdown. I was wide open 2 more times. The first time they ran it, Baker ends up throwing to the other side because they have a coverage breakdown. The second time they ran it, Mike Evans is breaking over the middle of the field. Baker takes that throw. When you're like looking at it back, you're like, oh, okay, Egbuka is running just down this field, wide open. The third time you run it, you get back to it. You gained all that information. You trust your concepts. You're trusting what information you gain from your defense and your players on the field telling you like, hey, I think we're going to be able to get this one. You're able to win the game where, you know, Lindsay, maybe if a situation happens different on the last drive for the Falcons, we're talking about it a little bit different. So I think for Grizzard overall, that was like a cool micro, like, to me, that's the story of football. It's like, are you able to have these ups and downs through a game and ultimately just find a way to win it, right? Like, that's all you need to be able to do is find a way to win it. I think he's still going to improve on so many different aspects of play calling, but that was just, I think, a cool example from week 1.
So, Sean, I think the question that I always have with the Bucs offense is, are they going to be able to run the ball? We couldn't see them in the Brady years run the ball super well. Dave Canales comes in, even though Baker looks good, year 1, still couldn't really see him run the ball. Last year, Liam Cohen comes in. Bucky Irving is one of the best running backs in the league. They're very efficient in the run game. They're sitting right around average right here. They weren't really able to get it going. They were getting
14 for 37 on the ground for Bucky.
Yeah, they were getting chunks of yardage, but no big plays. Do you think that is a question mark, particularly as it pertains to Baker Mayfield, or do you think that the Falcons just had a good showing in week 1?
You know, I was a little bit more impressed with the Falcons defense overall than I think I was expecting to going into this one. I do think Jeff Ulbrich had some just like fun things going on overall. We got linebackers blitzing right through the middle at 100 miles an hour. And I mean, I don't want to fully judge this unit without, when you get Tristan Wirfs back there, you're able to bump multiple people back into spots that they're more comfortable than they usually are. So I would say kind of too early to tell on this one, just because the Bucs, to me, they've earned our benefit of the doubt a little bit here, where I really enjoy watching Bucky Irving play the sport of football, and I think their offensive line is going to be cohesive. They're going to be able to mesh together once again when you get Wirfs back in there and you get things rolling.
Team probably slowed down a ton for Ulbrich after being the interim head coach. He goes back and like steps out of that whole whirlwind of a job, and he's like, "This is easy. We got this one." Which is one of the points that I wanted to go back to with regards to the offensive coordinator and the Bucs, and the fact that obviously football is about running plays, collecting information, trying to figure out how to do it, you know, when to do it again and how to take advantage of the things that you've already seen. But do you, and I think this is a question for both of you, do you think that it's impressive that somebody who is calling plays for the first time has the wherewithal to do all of those computations and then go back to it at the right time? Because we see, you know, when people are head coaches for the first time, just kind of like, you know, get that deer in the headlights and all of the gamesmanship that you absolutely know how to do on your couch kind of is like there's too much going on, right? Like, so it strikes me that might be interesting that he was able to like call on that at the right time.
I think it deserves at least a little bit of credit. Again, I don't think it was a perfectly called game overall, but if you're trusting the people around you, or if it's, hey, just in his head, I feel pretty confident that Egbuka would have said, like, guys, like, please do this one. And so I think to understand and have that trust of everyone in the system and understanding, like, hey, like, I don't have to be the one that is leading every single time. I feel confident that like Grizzard had multiple people around him, like everyone is coming together on that decision. I actually don't know if Grizzard is on the field or in the box. I assume he's on the field, and a lot of times there's a positive because you are talking directly to players. They're coming up to you and say, like, I was wide open, and then he can look at his eyes and say, you know what, you probably were. And then up top, they're looking at the still shots and say, yes, like this guy was wide open. Baker can see it. You can get to it. So I think absolutely deserves a little bit of praise. And it's like, it's always a little showy, right? When you can kind of see it on the field, because every, you know, offensive coordinator is going to have like 15 examples per game where they're like, oh, you know, like this was exactly set up from this play, but it just didn't end up in the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, and Lindsay, having been on the headset where the plays are being called, signaling in the plays, during my time at Tulane, there is a lot of bullets flying. I mean, you got to consider the personnel. It's a little different on offense, obviously, because the personnel is more reacting to you on the other side, but you have to make decisions about the personnel you need in there. You have to make decisions about your play calls on first and second down versus third down. You're getting information in from the analytics team or the ops team about what at which point you will go for it on fourth down, and you're getting that information as early as first down and trying to chart out 2-3 plays earlier. It's not even considering hot zone, red zone, check with me's, all this other stuff. There's a lot of bullets flying at any given point in time. So it is pretty impressive to see at least some type of plan long term and the ability to identify live, which I think is extremely difficult. You do try to go in with a good process. You do try to stay with it. But the ability to identify live is a sign, I think, number one, that Grizzard it has an arrow up. But more importantly, I think that this offensive staff probably is working together well, which is difficult enough at any given point in time, much less giving your first time calling plays.
On the flip side of the offensive coordinator loss situation, and Shawn, I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the Lions tape in much detail, but I would love to get your thoughts just about what you saw about the Lions and any takeaways that you have about the loss of Ben Johnson. I've been kind of going through in that Netflix quarterback show, like slowly, and I just happened to have watched the episode with Goff where he's standing on the field and he's literally saying out loud, like, wasp, 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 give me wasp. He like wanted a specific play. Obviously, Ben Johnson can't hear him. And then, of course, Wasp comes in on the headset. And he was making a point about the fact that they were so aligned and like on the same page and their relationship. And maybe I was watching it specifically because I knew we were trying to figure out soon what Jared Goff was going to look like without Ben Johnson. But it was an interesting episode to watch right before they took the field without him, because there was so much made about their relationship and how important they were to each other. And I was wondering if that actually might have had an effect, more so than I thought it was going to, probably.
I mean, Lindsay, I'll tell you, the first thing I felt when I was watching the film is, hey, these Packers guys are pretty good. These
True story.
Packers guys
100%, yeah.
So that is fun. But, you know, you look at how, like, Goff had a really low average depth of target in this game. I think the last time he played against the Packers, he did as well. And, you know, John Morton, offensive coordinator for the Lions now, he was an assistant still in Detroit in 2022. So maybe you have, you know, some overall crossover there. I wouldn't expect the offense to like feel the same way in week one as it would in the future. I'm really curious, and this is something, you know, Sam and I certainly talked about all year, just how you feel about your offensive line overall, where, I mean, in this game, I thought Lucas Van Ness was able to produce a little bit more than I thought I would have expected, kind of just coming in, just based on what we've seen. So is it a situation where your offensive line makes you feel a little bit less comfortable? Is it a little bit of, hey, you know, teams are going to be able to play zone coverage because Ben Johnson's not there stretching us in the same ways? I mean, I was surprised looking at the game where Jahmyr Gibbs has something like 10 catches, which, you know, great. I know all the PPR fans are happy about that. You get like 31 yards. And I think that is a little bit of the product of how the defense is forcing you to prioritize things. So certainly a long season, and, you know, no one knows week one overreactions more than me, but it's certainly going to be something that we're looking at over and over and over.
But it wasn't even just Jahmyr Gibbs, though, like 10 targets is wild. Though, like, you are, you know, throwing to these guys in the short and intermediate areas of the field so much more than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and J-Mo had 11 targets combined. And then don't even get me started on Isaac Tisslaw. Please just get him involved. Like, the one throws that catch in the end zone. I don't want to get ahead of myself with him, but I think he could be an interesting piece here. But it felt like obviously there was something there that maybe the Packers had done to take those guys out of the game, but also the Lions of old would have found a way around it. And so I'll be interested to see if they can like find a way to get those guys more involved next week. I think that's the thing I have circled.
Yeah, and I want to headline too, Lindsay. It was very interesting to see Morton in that position with the Lions, which I think Dan Campbell still has a big kind of grasp on that offense as well, because we got to see Tanner Engstrand and the Jets play, and we also got to see BJ coach a team in the Bears. And from both of those teams, we saw at least the intention to make a lot of middle of the field throws. We weren't really able to see Caleb Williams complete a ton of middle of the field throws, but we were able to see Justin Fields complete them. We did not necessarily see that from Jared Goff, and we have come to see that time and time and time and time and time again, to the point where we believe that he is one of the best quarterbacks in this league, particularly at doing that. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that middle of the field rate across the Lions tree, I guess, or the Ben Johnson tree for the rest of the season.
Good stuff, guys. Shawn Syed, thank you so much.
Appreciate it as always.
So, Sam, it's perfect that you brought up Justin Fields there as a lovely segue into the things that we learned in week 1, because one of the things that I learned is that he can throw the ball, right? All offseason, we talked about the Jets leaning into the design run game, joking about how high their run rate was going to be, and they even made it look for a minute there like we were onto something when they ran on 3rd and 11 early in the game. But Mr. Fields did not just run in this game. He also threw the ball very, very well. Top 5 in EPA per drop back this week. Top 5 in CPOE, that's completion percentage over expected. Top 5 in success rate. And he had the second highest passing SumerScore after Matthew Stafford. He was 3rd in pressure rate, meaning he had the 3rd highest pressure rate, 50%, but he only took 1 sack. That is a 7% pressure to sack ratio. That's a good number. Offense had a 50% success rate on early downs. They clearly didn't win the game, but obviously it wasn't because of the offense, which scored 32 points and held the ball for 32 minutes. As Zach Rosenblatt pointed out in The Athletic, New York had been 53-1 when those bars had been cleared before Sunday's game. So I feel like there's a lot that we learned there. Yes, it's one game. Slow your roll, Lindsay. We have a large sample size relatively of him not being a particularly high-end passer. But one of the things that I have always said about Justin Fields, and I said it before about Sam Darnold, was that the environment was never great. He was never utilized in the way that felt perfect. We were put in offenses that put him in a position to highlight the things that were not his strengths, or more specifically were his weaknesses, right? So in this particular case, we know he can run. But the fact that he's able to take the field in week 1 and put those kinds of passing numbers, I think is a very good sign for his potential for the rest of the season, and obviously for this offense's potential as a result.
My favorite stat in Shawn Syed and Tash Seth's Stats and Scheme newsletter, which you can subscribe to now on SumerSports.com, was that he threw a high-end 31.8% of his passes over the middle of the field in Tanner Engstrand's coming from the Lions offense, and he was still able to achieve all those excellent passing analytics that you just outlined, Lindsay. And that's not to say, we were laughing about what their pass rate over expected, how much they would be running. He still had 10 designed rushes. This was like the Sam Bruchhaus Super Bowl game. It was beautiful. It was excellent to watch. It was an excellently called game from Tanner Engstrand. And he was very successful in those design rushes. And so the real question is, given the nature of the middle of the field passing game, is he going to be able to keep up that level of difficulty on his throws, and in particular that completion percentage over expected? We know that the middle of the field is the 3-point shot in the NFL. It's a little bit more difficult, but it comes with big efficiency boosts and big plays. We've seen Ben Johnson take advantage of that and turn Jared Goff into one of the better passers in this league. If Tanner Engstrand can do that with Justin Fields, plus the addition of a 70% success rate, which obviously is aided by the naked boot, which no one even thought that Justin Fields could run on the goal line. And sure enough, he just jogs into the end zone, despite being, probably the number 1 weapon for them in the red zone. If they're able to add both of those together, this Jets offense is going to look really great. And moreover, for fantasy folks, it's going to open Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall up the same way it did this week.
Well, and notably, Breece Hall scored very high in our SumerScore metrics. And that I thought was incredibly interesting, considering, at least within the fantasy space, a lot of discussion happened in the last month about whether or not he was going to share that backfield and or be usurped by Braylon Allen. So
that's not even to say that they didn't get opportunities. Like Braylon Allen got a lot of opportunities. Isaiah Davis got a lot of opportunities. Like this has very much the capability to be an egalitarian offense, much like the Lions have been, where Jameson Williams some weeks is fantasy relevant. And then there's the studs, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then the running backs are very good and fantasy relevant as well. I'm going to be tracking the Jets very closely because they're doing a lot of things correct.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And that they did that against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Like it wasn't like, we're talking about the Colts game and Daniel Jones and kind of going like, wait, because, well, at least I am, because I have expressed a ton of concerns about the Dolphins, and I feel like a lot of that game had to do with the Dolphins. This is a case where the Steelers defense is certainly not perfect, but like it's on a different tier,
Right.
So,
And we talk about first-time play callers. You try to come in with a plan, and their plan was to not run the ball to TJ Watt. Like, TJ Watt commands the side of the field. That's what he's known for doing. The Steelers want to cut the field in half because they believe in Alex Highsmith and they believe in Hayward and the rest of that group. And they just decided, sweet, in the run game, we're going to let them cut that side of the field off. We're going to run behind our young tackles, our left side of our offensive line. It ended up being pretty successful. When you stick to a plan, often it works pretty well, particularly when you have a guy who was as hot as Justin Fields was on Sunday.
yeah. I hope you drafted him in fantasy, because if he continues to play all season long and he plays like this with the rushing upside that is baked into that, like that could be such a massive value pick. I have 0 shares of him outside of dynasty leagues where I do have him. So that's good.
100%. And Lindsay, this must just be the game where we were learning and learning. We were in the classroom.
Oh, what'd you
reading
learn?
the textbooks, because a question that I had no idea what the answer was going to be coming into the season was going to be what the Steelers offense looked like. Was Aaron Rodgers going to win out and we were going to see the same kind of shotgun, pre-snap, quick throw stuff that we saw last year? Or was it going to be the Arthur Smith offense? I went back
Who's
and
in charge here?
Exactly. Who's in charge here? And I went back and looked at Arthur Smith's year-to-year under center play action rates. And he is pretty flexible. When he was with the Titans that had Derrick Henry, they were under center and run and play action. When he didn't quite have the level of quarterback and young running back, when he was the head coach of the Falcons, it switched up. He was kind of more egalitarian. They weren't necessarily doing a lot of the under center play action stuff. Last year, they were back in the top. That is what they're going to look to do this year. The interesting part is Aaron Rodgers had a very high sack rate in week 1, one of the highest in the league. As a 40-plus-year-old quarterback, is he going to be able to sustain that? And as someone who we have seen rattle the cage from time to time, is he going to be able to sustain the mentality of getting hit, especially if it comes out to what at the end of the game in terms of expected points added ended up really being an average offense this week? They did not achieve the most. They got the W, but on a play-by-play basis, it wasn't that successful. And so, or at least, imminently successful when you have that type of guy getting hit so many times. And so I'm really interested to see how this progresses. Are they just going to sacrifice Aaron Rodgers to the Wolves, put him back there, turn his back to the defense, faking play actions and gunning the ball deep? Or at some point, does this come a little bit more conservative to what Aaron Rodgers wants to look like?
I feel a little bit similar to the way that I felt after Russell Wilson played his first game with the Steelers last year, where I don't want to be Debbie Downer, and I know that it comes across that way, but like I just want to wait and see. Like I'm in a holding pattern, and I know that he felt and he said into a microphone that he thought he had showed the Jets that he could still play football and like proven them wrong. And
check the stats.
So
Yeah,
likable.
you got the victory, but check the stats, brother. Like there is a box score.
Well, one of the things that I have on my radar to keep an eye on this year that statistically is a pattern when quarterbacks get older is their ADOT comes down.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes down, and it doesn't actually always come down, I should rephrase that. But if it comes down, that tends to be a sign of something. And his ADOT came down. Last year, he had the lowest ADOT that's average depth of target, by the way. He had the lowest average depth of target of his career last year. And obviously all of the other stats that support maybe a decline. And so I think that the Jets had good reason. Obviously, anybody who has listened to me talk about Aaron Rodgers knows that I agree with the Jets and think that they had good reason to maybe move on from him. But I am concerned about the fact that the average depth of target was, I forget the official number, I don't have it in front of me. It's like 4.3 or something like that. It's like 4 and change. That's a really low average depth of target. And so if that continues, and again, it's a 1-game sample size, that could be game planning, but it's consistent with a pattern that's already been established, much like we said with Cooper Kupp, of a decline. Are we going to continue in that department? Is that a sign that maybe the arm strength isn't there? Interesting note, I keep mentioning Netflix's quarterback show, but in that same episode that I talked about earlier, Kirk Cousins talked about how he was hurt in this game, and he was talking about the challenge of knowing in your brain when to fire, when the window is there, all that stuff. Like, you understand football, you understand the timing, you understand it all. When your body cannot do what your brain tells it to do, that creates problems because you're like, now, and then, oops, the ball didn't get there in time and it's a pick or something like that.
Right.
So as we evaluate whether or not the arm strength is still there, then that's something else that I'm keeping my eye on, because Lord knows that, like, up here, that's always been a strength for Aaron Rodgers. Will it continue to be his friend, or will it fight against the things that his body may or may not be able to do anymore?
Yeah. To put it in perspective, they were 31st in ADOT this week out of 32 teams. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Something to keep an eye on. One of the things that I learned this week, Sam, is that we're going to see a lot of tight ends on the field this season, and I'm here for it. Sometimes 3 tight ends at one time. The Cardinals lined up with 3 tight ends 25% of their offensive plays. Sam, they had multiple tight ends on the field for over half of their offensive plays, 50.8%. And they were not the only ones that were that high. The Browns' primary personnel package in week 1 was 12 personnel. They ran that 50% of the time after using that personnel grouping on just 15% of their plays last year. And we're not done. 3 more teams ran more plays than not with multiple tight ends. The Packers and Eagles, who did that 55% of the time, and the Steelers, who ran 53% of their plays this way. Like the Browns, they're way up in 12, only ran it 19% of the time last year. And that is not counting the Ravens, who were at 50% exactly. I think offenses are evolving as far as this position is going. I think we're seeing more and more athletic pass catching tight ends come out in the draft who can also block. I feel like that's a little bit of a cheat code. I think tight ends are being developed at a higher rate at younger ages. And I think all of this points to the continued production growth that we've seen in box scores in recent years. There were 12 tight ends this week who had 6 or more targets. Last year, week 1, there were 3. 16 tight ends had double-digit fantasy points this week. Week 1 last year, there were 5. And yes, I put in waiver claims for Harold Fannin this week. So there's that. But I do feel like the tight end story is one that will be really interesting to monitor as the season goes on.
Lindsay, I am so glad that you're highlighting this, because this is something that I've had my eye on for years. We've started to see these folks who are extremely personnel diverse kind of pop up. And a lot of the times it was just switching guys in and out. And we saw that a lot with like a guy like Sean McVay, who's typically going to run 11, but you're going to see players in different places and you're going to see them do different things. I think that was kind of the beginning. And then when guys like Ben Johnson and guys like Todd Monken and the Baltimore Ravens were able to get these big tight ends or fullbacks involved in the passing game, Kyle Juszczyk and Kyle Shanahan, obviously another example of that. It just makes planning for an offense a lot more difficult. Now, the comeback would be, why wouldn't you just want a wide receiver running routes rather than a fullback or rather than a tight end? And that's a great explanation. Like, that's something great to hit, but it can't be, you don't have to establish the run to make people fear the run. And when you're coming out in 13 personnel, immediately everyone is going to fear the run. Were the Cardinals the most effective in the run game this week? No, they weren't. They were about average. But nonetheless, it was able to open up the pass, particularly in the red zone. It was able to open stuff up for Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. And when you're showing a front like that and you believe in your guys like Higgins or Tip Ryman or especially Trey McBride, who, when it really comes down to it, is kind of playing wide receiver functionally, but just has a different level of body type, and thus you can kind of motion him pre-snap. It just opens up a lot if you have that level of guy.
It feels like it disguises a little bit more of what your intent is on that offensive play, right?
100%. It's very difficult when you have a 6'5", 265-pound person to not think that person is going to block. And moreover, it's really difficult when that person can catch the ball, like Trey McBride. It's really difficult to not run out a defensive back to go cover him. And that fear in a defense coordinator's mind, I think, is enough to get over the realities of the situation, which is, yeah, sure, you could probably trot out nickel out there, but then what if they do motion him in at run? And I think coaches' neediness to be able to answer every question. And that's just the reality of talent in the NFL. There's a limited amount of talent, brings these personnel diverse teams a little over the average just based on whoever they have.
Love it. I love this week was so fun learning all of the different things. What else was felt particularly memorable for you?
The thing that I had to figure out was who was getting the Liam Cohen bump. We
Yeah.
saw Liam Cohen, as we discussed with Shawn, turn a
Was there
rushing
going to be
offense.
one?
Exactly.
Even.
Was there
Yeah.
going to be one? Of course. We saw him turn what was a putrid rushing offense into a really good rushing offense. So what I learned was that Travis Etienne is going to be the Bucky Irving this year, Lindsay. That's what I learned. We saw him have an excellent, efficient running game. We saw pretty much all the same stuff we saw last year from the Bucks being utilized, including Brian Thomas Jr. on a beautiful end around, which thus opens up other plays for Travis Etienne. And then come on Monday, Tank Bigsby is out of there. He's traded for a 5th and 6th round pick. A lot of people could be saying this is the Bashal Tootin time. I'm sticking with Travis Etienne. That's what I learned.
Yeah. I think that was a very interesting observation this week also, how good he looked in this offense. And I'm wondering, now let's do a quick aside, help me with my fantasy. Because I think you could still maybe try and grab him. You could make a trade for ETN and hope that maybe somebody else thinks that it's a little fluky. So if we agree with what you're saying and that this is sort of a product of environment and that this is a great situation for ETN and what we saw in week 1 is maybe likely to continue, then, do you think that is likely true? Like, are you willing to push your chips in to a degree on that?
Here, I'll argue for and against it. Here's
Okay.
the argument against Travis Etienne. The Panthers' rush defense last year was really bad, and they added a bunch of young guys. It could be that they didn't know what to prepare for with Liam Cohen, or at least didn't prepare for what it would look like. Obviously, there's a level of uncertainty moving to a new team, and thus a team which was already underpowered in the run game defensively just got overpowered by a lot of good talent. The case for him is that he had like 50% carry share. A lot of that was eaten up by Trevor Lawrence scrambling as well. And it just seems as if they're going to continue forth with him as the number 1 running back, given how explosive he has been during his career. Remember, explosivity was never really his issue. His issue was fumbling and kind of the down-to-down passing back stuff. That was always Travis Etienne's issue. I don't think that's going to be an issue underneath Liam Cohen. And I think it would be really interesting, given that a lot of people stick to that ADP. You could get him in the later rounds. It could be really interesting to see if you can steal him in like a flex first. He's on someone's bench trade. I think that'd be an interesting way to go about it.
Totally. I'm going to have to figure out what I'm willing to give up for that. All right. I've got a lot of fantasy related things to do for the rest of the day. Before we get to that, one more thing that I learned is that maybe the Patriots are not ready to be like the 4-win to the playoffs team just yet. I mean, there's still so much time, but they look like a team that maybe we got a little bit higher on, we being the collective we, than they're ready to be just yet. They look like they've got a lot of work to do, particularly. And one of the biggest questions that I had kind of circled is like, this is what we're going to learn from them. What I want to learn is who their pass catchers are, right? Like they just did not have anybody that came to the forefront that could be trusted consistently last year. And I walked away from this week wondering if I actually had an answer to that question yet.
It's tough, especially when you have a young quarterback. I mean, to a certain degree, we were able to see Jaden Daniels turn Terry McLaurin into an all-pro last year when a lot of people were asking the same questions about him. I don't have a good answer, and I don't know what it's going to look like, really. I think that's the real question is, can Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels construct something that makes sense for Drake May? I wasn't really overly impressed with Drake May himself at the time, and you combine that with pass catchers you don't really love, and that causes some problems. Who I was impressed was Will Campbell, and we know that Mike Vrabel wants to run a power game. And I think if Will Campbell is able to develop over this year, perhaps we will see kind of the Panthers trajectory within this year, which unfortunately didn't look great in week 1, but the Panthers trajectory where an offensive line starts to come along and thus makes things easier for a quarterback who doesn't have a lot of weapons. As a result, I kind of agree, Lindsay. I think this is going to be a little longer build than we'll see. I'm going to continue looking on if that defense can prop them up. Weren't really looking great either. I think this is going to be more of an average team than kind of a jump team. And I think that's primarily just because I trust Mike Vrabel and Drake May's athleticism, and obviously can have those big spike games, but you got to deal with those downside games with kind of the whole pass group. And it seemed like that was kind of what happened in week 1.
Let me ask you this, and I'm putting you on the spot, and I don't want to do that in order to say, like, no, I'm not excited about this person. But Kayshon Boutte, how do we say his last name?
Kayshon Boutte.
I just want to call him Booty. Okay, so he had a pretty good game, over 100 yards, right? Like, this was clearly the pass catcher that had the best game on this team. By the way, they targeted 11 different pass catchers, which is another thing that sometimes is the sign of a healthy offense. In this case, I wonder if it's not the sign of a lack of a target hog, right? Like, you want someone that's your guy, and the fact that nobody really emerged and they just kept like spreading the ball around, in this case, I think might be a negative sign. But Kayshon, 103 yards, a catch rate over expected of plus 27.5. EPA was plus 8.4 yards per route run, 2.5, right? Like, it was a good outing for him. He's not a big name. He's not somebody that we would even have really considered to be the guy in New England this year. But his last 3 games of last year, he also produced in 2 of the 3 anyway. So now, including this week, in 3 of his last 4 games, he has 5+ catches on 7+ targets and 95+ receiving yards. And so I'm wondering if there is a chance that you think that he might actually be the answer and that we were just looking in the wrong direction, or do you think that that is unlikely to consistently be the case?
Yeah, I think you got to look kind of at the whole picture here. And a lot of the discussion with him was about like some of these big drop games. Like last year with the Jets, he has 2 drops, Titans drops. Like, I'm almost putting him in like the Quentin Johnston category to a certain degree. And I think, frankly, I believe a little bit more in Quentin Johnston, but it is good to see this type of progression there. I just don't know if he can be a true target earner the way that we really want to see someone do with Drake May. Ideally, that's Stephon Diggs for them. Weren't really able to see it. Didn't look fantastic. But I think I put him more in like an ascendant wide receiver 2, perhaps lane right now is where I would put Kayshon Boutte.
I know that ideally it's Stephon Diggs. I have a fear that with Diggs, we might be looking at a Cooper Kupp like age situation. I don't know, because I think that there was some evidence his last year in Buffalo that maybe a decline had already started, and you can work around some declines like the Chargers did with Keenan Allen before he went to Chicago and just brought, the depth of target down. And but I think something is not. I don't think Steph Diggs is the same Steph Diggs, that we think of as Steph Diggs. I think, and it's clearly coming off the injury. Our evidence last year with guys coming off injury was that they weren't the same for a while. And so maybe it'll just take a little while, but also at his age, I wonder if there is a ramp back up to where we want him to be. And so I was keeping an eye on like Demario Douglas, and will he take that next step this year? Is Pop going to be the guy, or is Kyle Williams, the guy that they drafted, going to be the guy? And I mean, obviously, it's still so early and anything could happen, but I didn't see evidence of any of that. And from a SumerScore standpoint, Kayshon was their highest scoring receiver, but he still came in at 60 in the ranks. And so that's obviously not where you want your number 1 wide receiver to be coming in at. All right, anything else, Sam?
I think the final thing you just got to hone in on, and this isn't necessarily a takeaway or a learning, but what JJ McCarthy are we going to see moving forward? Like the first half, it looked really brutal. Negative plays, sacks, picks. It just didn't look good. Second half, started to keep it moving, started to find completions, and best of all, had a quarterback design run touchdown. So I think that's something I want to keep an eye on. And very similarly, Bo Nix is a guy that I want to keep an eye on, because the entire story moving into this year for Bo Nix was, could he continue to limit negative plays and expand his role in the offense? His role in the offense expanded. The negative plays came along with it. I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to survive what looks to be an extremely tough division, with the Chargers having Justin Herbert play MVP ball, and obviously the Chiefs as well, and Geno Smith looking pretty good as well. I don't know if they're going to be able to survive offensively in some of these games if they start to get shootouts, if Bo Nix continues to make negative plays.
Yeah, interesting there. I agree with you about Bo Nix, because that's like a step back at a time when we were expecting a step forward. Again, super small sample size, plenty of time to turn it around. The JJ McCarthy thing, like first time, like he's never done it, right? Like first time in the NFL. I fully expect and write off any kind of struggles that you have. And I like that he built on it and kind of got settled a little bit, and that the arrow pointed up as the game went on. So we'll see if he continues to build on that. Were you impressed with Caleb?
I was not. I was
Yeah, I
not
wasn't
impressed with
either.
Caleb.
And I really wanted the Bears to look very different. And I highly suspect that any Ben Johnson effect would take a minute to kind of, establish a rhythm and get on the same page and stuff. But I went back and I watched his lowest scoring SumerScore plays, which is a rad thing that our engineering team has built out, that we have the ability to kind of like have, links to the video there. And so I can click over and watch okay, this one we scored poorly, like, what happened. And I noticed in all of the plays that were red, which is like the lowest, he wasn't under pressure. It was just kind of like he wasn't sped up, is what I'm trying to say. Because one of the things that I really wanted to keep an eye on this year, I really want his time to throw to go down. I want him to establish a little bit more pace in the pocket. And actually, weirdly, his time to throw in this game went up from last year. It was like over 3. And so we moved in the wrong direction for a 1-game sample. But in this case, he was on these throws. They were just misfires. It wasn't like hand in the face and any of that. Like, he had time and he just didn't make the throws. And so maybe those are why those were the lowest graded plays, right? Because those were the ones that were on him. And I'm sure there were other examples. And I know there were other examples where he was sped up, but I didn't love seeing him have time in this many opportunities that I watched where he didn't make the throw.
I think the thing that troubled me the most is it felt like things were there offensively. And to a certain degree, given the level of talent and the level of talent they've added, kind of know they were there, especially over the middle of the field. We just saw him either decline to make the play, which Troy Aikman called out several times, or miss the play, as he did notably across the middle with DJ Moore. So the first drive, or the first 10 attempts, everyone was getting really excited. But what I was thinking is, like, this is the Caleb Williams offense. And we've seen Caleb Williams run the Caleb Williams offense in the National Football League. And it ended up in exactly what happened in the second half. Sacks, balls not getting completed, confusion. And it didn't feel like the Ben Johnson offense. It felt like people were running the Ben Johnson offense. It just didn't feel like Caleb was on the same page. And so despite them moving the ball down the field, despite him making big plays, I don't want to say I don't know if he can do it, but it certainly seemed as if it didn't look like what it looked like with Jared Goff. That's all that I'll say right now.
Have you looked at the week 2 schedule yet?
I have. I got the Chiefs Eagles really circled, because that's going to answer a lot of questions, because I think they're going to get after Jalen Hurts. I don't think we're going to get Jalen Hurts scrambling all over the place this week. Obviously, I was excited that Justin Herbert was scrambling all over the place, but I'm interested to see what that defense looks like. And I'm really interested to see what an Eagles defense, which has some massive holes, particularly at the cornerback position, matches up against the Chiefs. Now they have Jalen Carter back.
Ooh, we've got Steelers Seahawks. And I say ooh because I'm interested to see the Steelers offense go up against the Seahawks defense.
Another game where we will learn a lot. kind of the opposite as it pertains to play action with the Seahawks. Didn't run a lot of play action. I think this is another great learning game because we're going to get some heat coming at Sam Darnold from both sides this time. We're going to have Alex Highsmith and we're going to have TJ Watt coming at him. I wonder if he can maintain at least the level of success. He was 10th in SumerScore last week. He was 10th in SumerScore last year over the aggregate. Obviously, that came down at the end of the year. I want to see if he can maintain that level of play, given all the changes with the staff there, and also given that he'll be facing a pretty good defense.
Very good Thursday night game to start the week. I'm not sure how frequently we're going to be able to say that. Commanders Packers is a great one for obvious reasons. And then I just need to, for 5 seconds, say, why are we playing football at 10 Eastern on Monday? Like, that game starts at 10 o'clock Eastern.
Oh,
Raiders,
that's right.
Chargers.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a West, those are two West Coast teams, but like, don't we all, like, we all watch prime time? Like, you in New York are going to have to start watching a football game at 10 Eastern, which just feels like bad process.
Season. It's season. You know, you're got to be locked in. You know, East Coast, I'm gonna be locked in. I'm gonna probably have to get a coffee or something, and I'm gonna be sitting watching Chargers Raiders.
See,
on
if I had
Monday night.
I've now reached the age where I can't have a coffee at night, or else I won't sleep for the entire rest of the night.
That's kind of the point.
That's a sad age to be at, Sam. I don't wish that upon you at some point. Okay, this has been super fun. Week 1, we learned a lot, and there is so much more to learn. Hope that you will stay with us here on this ride here at the SumerSports Show. Go to SumerSports.com for all of the advanced data that you're looking for, and please make sure to subscribe at SumerSports.com to the Stats and Scheme newsletter, which has all of the advanced game previews for every single Week 2 game, a few of which we've already mentioned. Thanks for being with us.